Hey everyone, I'm going to now go through the translation of all three rock cases, pointing out some of the important facts that you need to know for your project along the way. So case number one, you notice that the scenarios are highlighted in blue. Rabba said, if a person had a rock placed in their lap, they didn't know about it, and they got up and it fell off. Again, here's your paradigm for ones. And any situation where you want to tell me what the halacha is, in a case of ones, it only works if it's analogous. If you can make an analogy and say the same way that case is very similar to this ones case, and therefore, since the law in here, whatever the law is in this case, would also apply the law in the case that you're making up. That's how the analogy would work. So, what's the halacha in this case? So now, guys, again, it goes one area of halacha at a time. Linyan nizakin chayav, regarding nezek, regarding damage, you'd be chayav. So now. And the klal, the reason that is because the klal by damage is that a person is always responsible for their actions. So even though it's ones here, it's irrelevant. You're still chayav. Linyan arba devarim patur, regarding the other four things that you would pay for if you injure somebody, patur, you're patur because you're only chayav for if you do it on purpose or you're negligent. Here again, it was a case of ones where it was totally out of your control. Linyan Shabbat, regarding Shabbat, Melechet Machshevet as Asar Torah. The Torah only asr, only prohibited doing something in the normal way, Melechet Machshevet, the normal productive way of doing an act, and this is not a normal productive way because you don't even know what you're doing when you're doing it. It was totally out of your control. Linyan Galut, regarding exile, do you go to exile if you kill somebody ba'ones? Patur, no, patur, you don't go to exile. Again, the klal when it comes to exile is that it has to be a mistake on your part. And since there was no mistake on your part, you do not have to go to exile. Linyan Ev, regarding Eved. So Pilut the Rabban Shimon Gamliel the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan and Rabban Shimon Gamliel argue about what is the klal when it comes to letting your Eved free. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says the klal is that he only goes free if there was intention. The Rabbanan say no, the klal is that you go free no matter what. Very similar to the klal we had when it comes to damages. It's not relevant what your intention is or whatever would happen. You do the damage, you pay for it. So too, Rabbanan say no, the klal when it comes to Eved is that if you injure Eved, he goes free no matter what. Rav Shpag says no, it's only if it was intention. You're in with intention. How do we see that? The Tanya, it says in a Braita, Haresh Haya Rabbo. Again, this is the drasha here. If the rabbi, if his master, Rabbo, his master was a doctor, but Amar lo, and the servant says to the master, please treat my eye, v'sima, but he blinds him. Chator lishnais, he says, drill my teeth, but he knocks the tooth out. What's the ruling? According to the Rabbanan, shechek badon, he can smile and laugh at his master, v'yatzal lecheru, and he can go free. So there's the rabbi's klal, which is that no matter what, he goes free. Rashbago, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, v'shechta, here's your drasha. No, the Torah says, adds the word and he damages it, right? If you strike your servant's eye and he damages it, what's the drush here? Drush meaning, how do you explain what's this extra word going to teach us? How do you explain the pasuk here? Teaches us ad shit chavin shachta. You have to have intent. That's his halal. So again, the focus for this project is, besides knowing what the Gemara means, is the fact that for damages in this case you're chayav. For Shabbat in this case you'd be patur because of the klal of melechet machshevet, etc., etc. Now. Next case, Higir ba v'shicha ba benafla. Okay, let's say he knew about it, but then he forgot and he got up and it fell off. This is a paradigm for shogeg. So if you want to know what the halacha would be in another case, you say, well, let's see, is it analogous to shogeg, right? Is it similar to shogeg, right? Is this case, right? If this is the paradigm for shogeg, is my case similar to that? And if it's true, then whatever the ruling is for these five cases, each of these five areas of halacha for shogeg would apply to your case. So let's read it again. Higir ba v'shicha, you knew about it but forgot, v'ama benafla, he got up and it fell off. Linyan zakin chayav, regarding damages you're chayav. Again, the klal is you always pay for the damage that you do. Linyan dal devarim patur, for the dal devarim you're patur again, because the klal is you only pay for the dal devarim if it's negligent or on purpose. This was neither negligent or on purpose. It was just a forgot. Linyan galut shogeg, linyan galut, regarding galut chayav, you are chayav. You have to go to galut. Now here's another drasha. The amarkra, as it says in the pasuk. So you know we're making a drush here because we're quoting a pasuk. The Torah says bishkaga. Right, you kill someone by accident. Okay, so what does that teach us? Mechlal, that implies the havile idea that you go to galut when there is shogeg, when there is a mistake. Where there is knowledge, there's knowledge, but you forgot. I mean, it has to be a mistake where there's knowledge involved. It's opposed to ones where there's no knowledge. In this case, havile idea, there was the idea, there was knowledge. He knew about it, but he forgot. So the same way the Torah says that you go to galut whenever there was knowledge and you made a mistake. So to in our case, you would as well. Linyan Shabbat. What about Shabbat shogeg? Patur, you be patur. Why? Because again, it's not melechet machshevet. Because again, the act that you're doing, you're not expecting. When you're doing the act, you don't know what you're doing because you forgot the rock was there. That's right. So anytime on Shabbat, if you do an act and you're like, hey, I didn't realize that was going to happen. Right? I forgot that was what's going to happen. That's patur. That's not a normal way of doing a productive act. Linyan Eved regarding Eved, Piluted Rabban Shimon Gamliel the Rabbanan. It's going to be a machlok between Rabban Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan again, because again, there's no intention. Whenever there's no intention, the rabbis say, "Who cares?" The Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, "I care," and you don't have to go free. That is the second scenario. Third scenario, this is our paradigm for what we call the honest mistake. So anytime you have a situation and you say, hey, I think this is very similar to, this would be an honest mistake case, compare it. Is it similar to a case like this, right? We're in this If it's true, if it is similar, then you'd say this serves as a paradigm for your new case, and you make an analogy. Just like in this case, you'd say chayav or patur, depending on the area of halacha. So in your case that you make up, that's the scenario you come up with where there's an honest mistake. Again, an honest mistake being where you set up everything to succeed, and there's nothing you could have really honestly thought beforehand was going to go wrong, and yet something went wrong that you couldn't really have thought of, you weren't expecting. So if the halach is chayav in this case, it'll be chayav in your case as well if you can make a proper analogy. So what's the ruling in that case? Linyan zakin chayav, regarding damages, you'd be chayav in this case. You'd be chayav if you make an honest mistake. Linyan del verim patur, for the other four things you're also patur, because again it's an honest mistake. It's not negligent because you set it up properly. You just didn't know that was going to happen, right? You didn't know that when you tried to throw a 2 it was going to somehow go 4, right? You know how to throw something less than 4 amot. You could do that. There must have been some kind of slip up that you weren't anticipating. Linyan Shabbat melechet machshevet ba'inan. For Shabbat you need melechet machshevet, and again this is not melechet machshevet. Melechet machshevet is not where I line everything up and it's going to go perfectly, and then whoops, I wasn't expecting that to happen. Well, the normal way you do productive act is you do exactly what you're expecting to happen. Linyan galut. Now what about galut? Here's our third drasha. Asher lo tzeida amarachmana. The Torah says, Asher lo tzeida. You go to Ir Miklat as long as you didn't plan. Okay, I'm going to give one explanation here, the simpler explanation to understand. What does that exclude? That excludes somebody in our case, right, who wanted to throw 2 and it went 4. That excludes this person from being able to go to Ir Miklat. What does it mean they're excluded from being able to go to Ir Miklat? Because you only go to Ir Miklat, Asher lo tzeidah, you didn't plan. In this case, the person did plan. The act that injured the person, the act that accidentally killed the person was an act that you planned to do, right? I planned on shooting a bullet past your head, and it went right into your head. Since that's not considered not planning, you did plan, you planned to shoot. Therefore, Parat that excludes in Kavein Lazark Shtein Vizar Kaber, excludes you from being allowed to go to Ir Miklat, and you are not allowed the protection of Ir Miklat. Linyan Eved, regarding Eved again, Piluted Rabban Shimon Gamliel the Rabbanan. It's a machloket once again, because again the klal is when it comes to Eved, if there's no intention, the rabbis will say no matter what, you still go. So he still goes free, and the Rabban Shimon Gamliel says no, you don't go free if there was no intent. So they'd argue here as well where there was no intent. It was again, we're talking about a situation where there was an honest mistake. I wasn't trying to injure my Eved. I set it up properly, but I ended up injuring him since it wasn't intentional. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says the Eved does not go free. So just to point out how we structured this assignment is not based on, here's one scenario, what's the halacha in each? It's area of halacha at a time. So you want to talk about nizakin, right? Nizakin, right? You want to talk about those 3 cases together, right? Nizakin in this case, right? Nizakin ones, nizakin shogeg, nizakin honest mistake. Then you want to talk about arba divarim ones, arba divarim shogeg, arba divarim honest mistake. Then Shabbat the same way. Galut the same way. Right? What's the halacha when it comes to galut ones? The halacha when it comes to galut shogeg, the halacha when it comes to galut in an honest mistake, and it's all based on the same klal. You say, here's the general rule when it comes to galut. Since the general rule when it comes to galut is X, therefore in the case of ones you were patur, in the case of shogeg you were chayav, in the case of honest mistake you were also patur, you were not allowed to go. And finally, same thing, Eved in all 3 scenarios. That's how you want to be structuring your project. Not based on, hey, in this scenario this is what happens, but here's the area of halacha. Here's the general rule that we learned for this area of halacha. And therefore, in each of these 3 scenarios, the ruling either is X, Y, or Z. Sometimes it'll be the same, sometimes it'll be different. I want you to explain why that is, right? How does the general rule for each area, how does that change the law? Then bring proof from our Gemara that the law changes, because again, in our Gemara, it tells if you're chayav or patur. And then to give other examples, again, depending on the project style that you're doing, give other examples of each type of scenario. Good luck, guys, and feel free to ask me any questions that you have.